Hey everyone, Marsh here. I hope you're all doing well and surviving our current pandemic. Like so many of us, I've been using my downtime to catch up on projects I've been putting off forever, one of which was cleaning up my home office. So during this process, I came across a yellow notebook, which is where I wrote all of my stories when I was a teenager living in Tucson, Arizona during the mid-1980s. It's been a really interesting exercise to go back and read my manuscripts. The most extensive, and technically I guess this would be my first finished manuscript, although it was never published, was a supernatural thriller I entitled In Heaven and Earth. It was a really interesting read for me, partly because it was based on actual events that were playing out at the same time I was writing the manuscript. So first, let me give you a little bit of background on those historical events and how they inspired this story. In the fall of 1983, Tucson residents Mary and Richard Birkbigler and 3 of their children had moved into an unfinished home in the foothills of the Santa Catalina Mountains just outside of Tucson. Shortly thereafter, the house began to be pelted by rocks thrown by an unknown assailant. The attacks began in mid-October and continued daily at least through the following December. Total damages to the Birkbigler home and various automobiles and other property came to over $7,000. There were multiple injuries, including to a toddler, but there were never any solid leads on the perpetrator, despite heavy involvement from the Pima County Sheriff's Department, which included the use of a helicopter. By early December, mercenaries had joined the hunt for the elusive rock thrower. These guns for hire included a Native American tracker who came equipped with a bow and arrow, and an ex-Marine who bragged about conducting successful search and destroy missions in Vietnam. But to my teenage mind, the most interesting outsider was a somewhat famous paranormal investigator named D. Scott Rogo. Rogo had made a name for himself during the 1970s as a parapsychologist who took a more skeptical approach to investigating unexplained phenomenon. He was a prolific author who co-wrote more than 20 books. The most famous of these was 1979's Phone Calls from the Dead, which described an alleged phenomenon where individuals received single, usually brief phone calls from recently deceased friends or family members. When Rogo arrived at the Birkbigler property, he certainly received his fair share of press regarding who or what was behind the rock throwing. Unlike the Sheriff's Department and the mercenaries, Rogo was not looking for a flesh and blood culprit, but rather what he described as a force. In other words, Rogo believed that a poltergeist was actually responsible for the assaults. Although I didn't know any of this until I started my current research to make this video, but Rogo actually included the Tucson rock throwing incident in his book On the Track of the Poltergeist, which was published in 1985. In that book, Rogo claimed that one of the Birkbigler children had a frontal lobe disorder, which was common to adolescents connected to poltergeist phenomenon. Although the mercenaries and the authorities had little use for Rogo's unorthodox beliefs, he was convinced, and he actually predicted in the press that the rock thrower would never be found. On this count at least, he was correct. To the best of my knowledge, the assailant was never identified, nor were there any solid leads as to his or her identity. The prevailing theory appeared to be that the attacks were by a transient who lived in a nearby desert and may have had an altercation with Mr. Birkbigler shortly after the family moved onto the property. However, this was never proved, and whoever this transient was, he was never identified. Interestingly, Rogo himself became a mystery when he was murdered in his home in 1990. Although a suspect was arrested, tried, and found guilty, he was later released when it was determined that the prosecution had suppressed evidence. As with the Birkbigler rock thrower, the true identity of the culprit in Rogo's murder is still unknown. My version of the rock thrower story differed in some pretty dramatic ways from how it actually played out for the Birkbiglers. In my manuscript, it's a Jewish family who's moved into an isolated home in a rural area of the Sonoran Desert. Like the Birkbigglers, their home is surrounded by acres and acres of gullies and washes, hills, and dense and dangerous vegetation. They are also frequently visited by native wildlife, which includes javelina and coyotes that raid the garbage cans, and sightings of more potentially dangerous predators like mountain lions. As the rock-throwing attacks continue, the authorities suggest that the family is being targeted by somebody who's anti-Semitic. The main character is the family's 17-year-old son Ariel, who is shy and introverted. He forms an awkward friendship with another teenage boy named Tyler who lives a few miles down the road and is insistent that they can identify the assailant after the authorities show little interest in the case. Tyler is an interesting contrast to Ariel because he's brash, pushy, and loud. He rides around the open desert in an all-terrain vehicle and is obsessed with Hollywood gossip magazines and soap operas. As the story progresses, suspicion falls on Tyler as the assailant, as he's clearly narcissistic and desperate for attention. But it's not until the family brings in a parapsychologist, my story's version of D. Scott Rogo, that the truth becomes known. Fortunately, the Birkbiggler story had a much happier ending than my manuscript. Eventually, the rock attacks ended, and although no arrests were ever made, no one was ever consumed by their dark inner demons either. So that's my trip down memory lane for today. It was really fun going back and not only reading this story, but also looking into the kind of rudimentary research I did at the time, long before the internet was available. This included creating a rudimentary outline, and even taking notes on the symptoms of a black widow spider bite so that would be factually correct. I also ripped out pages from various magazines which are used to describe the local wildlife and the family's desert home. Because a lot of the action takes place in Ariel's home, I even drew a floor plan because it was really important to know where all the windows and doors were. I also kept this trail bar advertisement, as this teenage boy and girl were the basis for the physical descriptions I made of Ariel and his older sister. So fun stuff, and I hope you enjoyed taking this journey into the paranormal with me. Please stay safe, stay home, and stay healthy. Cheers, everyone.